The Victorian ball coming up, and this time the theme is the first Bustle era. We need a dress. And I'm especially inspired by this magenta beauty from 1869, 1870-ish, so very early in the first Bustle era, and we're going to try and recreate a dress based off of that. To start with, I sat down with a piece of paper and a pen and tried to figure out my skirt panels. I wanted to have a slight train which is still suitable for daytime, and obviously the skirt back also needed to accommodate the bustle. In the end, the back panel is about 30 centimeters longer than the front, but it really depends on the bustle you're wearing. I figured out the length by putting my bustle cage on in front and measuring to the floor with a measuring tape. Here are the skirt panels I ended up with. The front panel is cut on fold, and then there are some side panels and a wide back panel that's going to be gathered. To do that, I sewed 3 rows of long basting stitches along the back of the waist panel, and then grabbed the top thread ends all at once and pulled together the fabric until it was the width of half my waist circumference. I would like to add that it's important to take your corseted waist circumference for the skirt, as this is going to be different from your usual waist measurements. I initially wanted to French seam the skirt seams, so I started to sew the panels together wrong sides facing, but then I decided that I wanted the duller, more taffeta-like wrong side of the satin to go on the outside of the skirt, because it seemed to me that this looked a little bit more historically accurate as it was not as shiny, so I stuck with a normal seam and zigzagged over the raw edges instead. Now obviously zigzagging edges is not at all historically accurate, but since it's on the inside of the garment, I'm going to get away with it. It is very important to secure the edges of your seams, especially when working with satin, because it frays like crazy, let me tell you right now. Either bind your seams, overlock them, zigzag them, French seam them, just do something, because if you don't, your skirt is going to just dissolve over time. The bottom of the skirt is going to be hemmed by a white pleated ruffle, similar to these fashion plates which I'm going to show you on screen. And I had planned to just pleat the flounce regularly, like in this example, but since my skirt hem already has a circumference of nearly 3 meters, and that would mean I need a 9-meter flounce, I decided to pleat at intervals, like this extant example shows, which meant that I only needed to pleat a length of about 6 meters. This is by far the most extra skirt I've made so far, and the flounce was hemmed by hand. A machine stitched hem would have been very visible, especially since I didn't have any exactly matching thread, so I really felt down the whole hem by hand and then set the pleats and pinned them in place. I made sure to pin the pleats both at the top and bottom, and then I sewed over everything once to make sure it didn't go anywhere before pressing the pleats in place. Then and only then you can remove the pleat pins and attach the flounce to the skirt hem right sides facing. Please take a moment to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and like this video if you're enjoying it so far. The engagement would really help me out. I also inserted a giant pocket into the skirt seam, because I learned from my mistakes with the 1860s dress, which I sadly made without pockets and then ended up to carry a little purse underneath my skirts, which was not ideal. So I created a huge pocket out of white cotton fabric, which was then attached to both the waist of the skirt and the side seam, so it could take some extra weight. It lies conveniently hidden in the right side seam of my skirt. Time for the waistband. The strip of fabric is folded in half, right sides facing, and the short sides sewn together. Then the waistband is pinned to the skirt waistline, right sides facing again, and sewn in place before being folded over, the raw edge tucked under, and the waistband sewn in place by hand from the inside of the skirt.
The same procedure as last year, Miss Sophie.
Same procedure as every year, James.
I added hooks and eyes for closures, and just look at that huge pocket. And that's the basic skirt done. But we're still missing some extra trim and decoration. As you can see on these pictures, 1870s dresses were often elaborately trimmed. This is partly due to the invention of the sewing machine, which made it possible to get a lot more work done in a shorter space of time, and hence the dresses could afford to be more luxuriously trimmed. After some consideration, the type of trim I decided to make is made from the fabric itself, by cutting strips and then removing some of the threads along the edges to create a fringe. This type of decoration is also visible on my initial inspiration for this dress, as you can see on this picture. This was incredibly messy and lengthy work, and it is very important to cut the fabric as exactly on the grain as possible, because otherwise you will have trouble pulling the threads evenly. The resulting trim was then box pleated at regular intervals, and hand sewn to the skirt. I pinned it to the skirt about 50 centimeters down from the waist at the sides, and looping down slightly at the center front and allowing the trim to curve down luxuriously at the back. The trim was then hand sewn in place. And here is the skirt done. Comment your thoughts below and stay tuned for the next part of this series, which is going to deal with the bodice and the ball gown. Thank you so much for watching to the end, and I will see you next time.